Hey everyone, I'm Norm. Welcome to Breaking Back, a tennis podcast by fans, for fans, covering all aspects of the game with an unfiltered lens. And I'm here with my co-hosts, Peter and Chris. Welcome to Breaking Back.
So welcome to Breaking Back, presented by Portland, Maine's Lone Pine Brewing Company and their new Winter Carnival beer, which will be released in mid-November. Winter Carnival is a 5.2% ABV seasonal winter white ale brewed with the colder months in mind. Winter Carnival has a custom spice blend with notes of clove, coriander, ginger, and orange peel. Winter Carnival will be available at any of your participating outlets starting mid-November. Thank you, Lone Pine.
Thank you, Lone Pine, as always.
It's going to be a good beer.
So, guys, welcome to episode 7. Recording here the week of Halloween. Everybody's enjoying the fall, I hope. Sweater weather.
Shoulder season here in Maine.
Pumpkin spice.
Pickleball is coming to an end and heading indoors soon.
They'll stay out pretty late.
Well, that's when it switches to paddle, though. Paddle stays outside, right?
Paddle is outside, yeah.
Are you guys watching as many horror movies as we are this time of year?
Yes, I'm watching a lot of horror movies this year. They're not scaring me like they usually do.
Can I come over? Because my wife won't watch scary movies.
Have you heard about this? Have you heard about this movie In a Violent Nature?
No.
Which is seen specifically from the point of view of the killer.
Horrible.
So you're walking through the woods. Well, it's interesting because it's speaking of point of view. The point of view is
It's disgusting.
you're walking through the woods with the killer.
Does it build tension, though?
It does. He'll be sitting there in the woods while all the future, I got to be careful not to spoiler alert, but the point of view is him in the woods 10 feet away from the campfire where everyone is sitting around telling stories, and it's a matter of time before he pounces on one of them, and you're just sitting there in the woods behind a tree waiting for him to come out. It's fascinating.
Well, we have a good podcast set up for today.
We do.
Chris was the lead on this one, the EP of episode 7. Brian Drews, we'll be talking to him about his work on visual effects for the movie Challengers, which took not only the tennis world, but I think the film world by storm this year. And then we'll talk about the Sinner scandal briefly and talk about the upcoming podcast, because we can actually do that. We've matured to the point where we can look ahead like 2 or 3 episodes.
Brian Drews is with us today. He's the executive producer of ZERO VFX, been a visual effects leader in the industry for over 20 years across various ends of media and entertainment. He's skilled in managing visual effects departments, leading high-performing creative and engineering teams, overseeing projects from pre-visualization to post-production, and optimizing production methodologies through intelligent tooling. Brian has founded and developed and sold a number of small entities, I believe, namely one to a company called Alphabet, which is pretty cool. And you've worked on or directly contributed to over 55 feature film projects as a visual effects producer and supervisor, which is why Brian is here talking to us today. Brian was the lead, please correct me, but you were the lead supervisor in charge of visual effects for the studio and the film Challengers, directed by Lucas Guadagnino.
Yep, Luca Guadagnino. Yep.
Luca Guadagnino. And let's jump into that. Since we're a tennis podcast, what was that like? Do you play tennis?
I do not play tennis, but I became somewhat familiar with it throughout the filming of it, for sure. In my role as visual effects supervisor, it's one of those things where I have to educate myself as much as is possible with the subject matter that I'm emulating, right? So just a small example, like Arthur Ashe Stadium, I needed to know how it's changed over the years for this film. So little things like that. But when it came to things that you people know about, like tennis pros know about, that still eluded me throughout shooting, right? But that's where some like Brad Gilbert comes in. He's the person that is in charge of, you know, are we boarding this tennis match appropriately? Are the actors trained appropriately? When we chose tennis doubles, are they the right kind of person? Or do they have the right stroke for somebody that would be an ATP? You know, so I have to become familiar with certain things. but folks like Brad Gilbert really do kind of carry that responsibility on set.
Brian, this is Norm. I'm probably the closest to the game, I guess, of the three of us.
He's an amateur professional.
That's right, in my mind. I look at the movie with a very critical eye, tennis lens. That's probably very unfair. But I said what made the movie believable and how I could see it being so successful at the box office is the visual effects and the sound that went with the movie.
Oh, thank you.
I'm just wondering, as I'm watching the movie, and I watched it again last night for the second time ahead of our conversation, and I was thinking about what kind of conversation did you have with the director around like just the getting to that real accurate tennis play to be able to sell it to people like me and to, you know, a younger millennial kind of Gen Z audience that just wants a different take from the movie?
Yeah, totally. I mean, that is the conversation. And during prep, which we had, I don't know, probably about 8 weeks of, so 2 solid months of prep, I was on the film for. And by the time I got there were already storyboards that were sort of laying out the tennis action and how he wanted to cover it as a director. And Brad Gilbert at that time was working to make sure the tennis and that the scoring and that things being storyboarded were accurate for folks like yourself. But it's a very different movie than other tennis movies, right? There's a story being told through tennis here, as opposed to something like King Richard, right? This is not the same kind of tennis movie as that is, right? This is more stylized and, like you said, needs to serve two audiences. And I'm really happy to hear that it kind of held up for you. There was a lot of attention paid to that, both in prep while we're storyboarding, but also throughout, right?
Yeah.
And then also going when we were kind of breaking the rules. I'm sure that last point is pretty farcical. We kind of knew that we're having some fun here at the finale of the movie and a 22 rally, right? We know that doesn't happen, but for the movie, it needed to. We knew when we were breaking the rules most of the times, right?
Brian, this is Peter. I'm the third head of the three-headed monster here on Breaking Back. Thanks in advance for joining us, and congrats, first and foremost, tip of the cap for pulling off what you've pulled off. A very visually engaging film, which I've watched for the second time last night as well. My question for you is, what was the rationale behind any of the specific varieties of tennis points of view that were in the film? My first takeaway was the almost dizzying tennis ball point of view in the final scene, which was incredible. There were some subsurface points of view, I think via plexiglass from underneath. There were some GoPro-style shots. There was points of view from the players, a player at the net. There seemed to be a very angry Tashi scene or two with forehand, backhand. Just curious to know what was the rationale behind any of those specific varieties of points of view.
We really wanted the audience to at times flinch, right, from being so close to the action. And Luca, it was very clear he wanted the audience to be on the court and really experiencing the action pretty viscerally. So in some cases, we sawed off the head of the racket so that the actor could swipe really close to camera with just the handle. And in visual effects, we added the racket head onto it. So essentially, the final result is the actor is swiping past the camera lens. So again, really getting the audience really intimate. That was a major piece of it, is really making sure that the audience felt it viscerally. The last POV, this was the first meeting I had with Luca. He described the shot to me as it's like the climax of his movie. It's something that I've never seen done before, was putting a camera through the eyes of a tennis ball, which, I'll always remember. He's like, all right, so how are we doing this? And I was like, yeah, we'll figure it out.
You tell us.
Let's see what this actually looks like first, right? Because that stuff is fast. It's really fast.
I'm just curious, on a 1 to 10 scale in your career, for my own sort of giddy curiosity, what was the difficulty level of this film?
It was fun. I'll just sort of say, like, from a 1 to 10 on the career level, as far as fun with the sequence, it was kind of up there with a 10, right? Difficulty wise, it was pretty close. I mean, it was 7 or 8, I would say, difficulty wise.
Because I know you've done some pretty amazing stuff.
Yeah, I mean, well, thank you. It was a lot of fun. It was certainly challenging. It was stressful to shoot. There was a lot of stress involved with it. But I think, like, The process we went through kind of gave me ease to know that the end result was what Luca had in his mind's eye. That's the worst thing. If investing all these resources, all this time, all this energy, it's the climax of the movie. You need to make sure that the director gets what he wants and that it fulfills what was in his mind's eye. Knowing that we nailed it, it was a great experience for me and something that I'm actually quite proud of. And one of the ways that we got there was we really wanted to start with what this really would be like. Imagine if you could put a camera as a tennis ball and you're hitting it across the court 9 times, 10 times, what's that going to look like? And so what we did was we took the audio bed of a real tennis match. So we could hear when the ball was getting hit by a racket. We could hear when it was hitting the ground. And we timed our camera to that audio bed. So it wasn't like we were doing any math or anything like that. It was like, no, actually, this is exactly what the speed needs to be for it to look right or for it to be authentic. And then it was up to us to figure out what's going to work for an audience to see and what's not. I obviously know that top spin and, there's a lot of spin that goes on these balls at that level, right? That's going to make everybody puke. So we chose not to do that at times. But let's do barrel rolls, right? Like, let's have some of these fun motions that, again, we're sort of suspending a bit of reality here, unlike the rest of the picture where we really tried to be accurate to the real world. Here, we're sort of suspending it for the audience's comfort and for the director's vision. So I think really starting off from the real place and then sort of adjusting from there is always the right way that I found for visual effects to be really effective and feel like it's part of a movie like this, right? A very real world movie.
Regarding that final point in the final scene, was that not a 23 shot point, I believe?
It was 22 or 23 times across the net. Yeah. Which we know. This was something I think Brad had to kind of take a moment and be like, okay, like this is
right.
Brad was very much about here's what's right. And, he was always very vocal, very dynamic on set. He was on set with us every day when there was tennis action happening. This was one where he definitely had to sort of struggle through it, I think. But we got notes from him at the end. As we were in post-production, we were sending him works in progress, and he had us move the baseline a little bit at times just to kind of make sure we weren't putting the ball too close to the net or the actors and talent would be standing where they really ought to be, things like that. So he was present all the way through.
Quick follow-up question to that. You say he was on set with you every day. Regarding your specific role, Brian, in visual effects, I was going to ask if it ever entailed you physically being actually on set. I would assume your role would be more sort of in studio versus on location. So what percentage of the scenes or what percentage of the film were you actually on location or on set?
I don't know how many shots are in the movie entirely, right? Like, say there's 2,300 shots in a movie, something like that. There were 950 visual effects shots.
Oh my God. That's huge.
There was a lot of work. So I was on set pretty much every day. And I am part of the production team. And it may be surprising, but in reality, when things are getting photographed, you're sort of saying, okay, here's our plan to make these final. We did have some face replacements in the tennis action. So certainly we want to make sure that from a technical standpoint, we're, doing all the sort of science that we need to on set to reconstruct or replace very important pieces of either the actors or the environment for things. But then also there's a lot of other location stuff that happens, things like, that storm that happens at the end of the movie. There's all sorts of stuff on there on set that the director has questions about. We work with the camera department and the DP, and we make sure that things are getting acquired. Because when you're shooting things, you're just getting a lot of raw material. And so we have to participate in that raw material because at the end of the day, from a visual effects standpoint, I'm on from 8 weeks before shooting all the way through sort of delivery of the final movie. So in a way, we're actually on it the longest of anybody on the crew, other than, say, the director and the producers.
That's pretty intense. So in this film particularly, did you find it interesting or difficult the way that it tends to be shot with a lack of style? It's very, I guess, in situ, or at least it feels that way. Do you know what I'm saying?
Yeah.
It's purposefully set up to look like the 80s or the 90s or whatever time period it was.
From where I stand, that's the director and DP and art department's sort of role.
Right. But matching that, though, is so difficult when it's normal like that as opposed to highly stylized, right?
Yeah, I mean, this is what I love to do. I love the reaction that y'all had, which is to hear that there's 950 shots in the movie. I love that surprise. I'd rather create surprise than work on a Marvel movie where you know everything is where there's a ton of CGI all over the place. Like,
Exactly.
would you ever have guessed that probably 70% of that final match we created the lighting conditions for it? No, you never would, but we did. That tennis court in many cases was some level of digital matte painting in some way, shape, or form.
They were playing on a trash heap in New Jersey. Like,
Well, no, we were playing outside after, like think about it, right? We're outside shooting for 3 weeks on the tennis court up at Wedgwood
right.
in New Bedford. We're outside for 3 weeks. Weather, time of day changes, all of that, but it all needs to fit together in a 3 to 4 hour tennis match.
Right.
And so we end up having to create a lot of that continuity in post. Again, this is something we knew, but which is all that invisible effects, which is what I love. So I love that stuff.
Getting back to the tennis play, what I loved about it is that there were definitely scenes when the way they were hitting the ball, especially Tashi, you're like, that's a pretty impressive serve or forehand, right? And you know it's not really her, but I'm in the back of my mind, I'm thinking, wow, they've done a really good job convincing me it is. And then there are some shots where you're seeing exactly how bad the actor is at playing tennis because it's a hard sport to master. I mean, it's a really hard sport. I was joking with Peter beforehand, like, I wonder if it's harder to train tennis players to act or to train actors to play tennis. Talk about the ball, though. I guess I'd like to get back to that question that we didn't follow up on yet. On what you actually did. Was there any camera attached to a ball at any point?
Yeah, nope, it was all post. Like you're saying, there's a couple of shots that we had a camera mounted to sort of the camera person's head, and they were hitting the ball. So there's a couple of those shots. Those weren't used all of that much in the final movie. I think there's maybe 3 or 4 of those shots. There were some super slow motion shots again where we were very close to the racket hitting. But most often what we would have is CG tennis balls. It became very difficult to move the production along when the actors were trying to emulate the form of somebody at the ATP level and actually strike the ball in the right spot.
Right.
You're never going to do it. You're never going to.
No.
You're going to work an hour just to get one shot, and that's never going to work. So at the times where they were taking the ball out of their pocket or hitting it with the racket from a serve, that's cool. All we care about is when they're interacting with the ball. That's what we would do practically. And then we would create CG balls for all the other stuff, like where it lands, where it rolls, all that stuff. That was generally what we were doing. So there was a lot of those shots as well.
Was the tennis consultant frustrated with his talent?
No, I don't. I think that
Because I've heard just reading articles that none of the acting talent had ever played tennis before.
they never had. And so they came in raw. But like you said, Chris, I've been on like 50 some odd movies. I've seen a lot of different sort of participation and earnestness levels, you could say,
Sure.
from actors prepping for physical roles like this. I was surprised and grateful that Mike, Josh, and Zendaya, they were there like 6 weeks before going to camp. They had 6 weeks to try to get this to look good, right? So I think given the amount of time that they had to do it, they were working pretty hard. And I think that some of them just had a more natural, can't remember who it was, but somebody just had a more natural sort of affinity.
Patrick, the guy that played Patrick.
Josh.
And I thought it was interesting. I mean, now I understand why he started to serve without the motion, because that plays into the whole tell at the end of the game, but at the end of the movie. But was Brad involved in that training leading up to, or was he just there to consult on the actual?
No, he was there training for sure.
Wow.
He had a couple of folks with him. There was a lot of resources put towards getting them to do that. And they were practicing that time the tennis doubles, because we had tennis doubles that bore a general resemblance to our actors. they were training at the same time. So they were working together and basically trying to emulate their doubles. So they were working together for at least 4 weeks before shooting all together to try to get some similarities so that from wide shots, it was believable that the doubles were the actors and that you weren't getting a totally different mechanic. Now, again, to my eye, it was fine, but I think to your eyes, you could probably note some differences, I would guess.
Sure, but I bet most people that don't know, even people that play tennis, unless you're like an advanced player, there's things that you're just going to believe and go along with. I mean, Brad is he's one of the smarter guys in the game, really well spoken and he's a great teacher, he's a great coach, right? I mean, interesting that when was this all shot? Because he's just coaching the number one talent in America for the last couple of years, just recently separated, but basically, I mean, he's coached Agassi, he's coached Roddick, Coco, all of them did extremely well under Brad's tutelage.
And he announces.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah, it was back in 22, the summer of 22, I believe.
I think he started working with Coco at that point.
Wow, you had to shoot that under COVID protocols also?
Yeah, dude, it was really hot. Like, it was, I always remember, like, so not to insult y'all, but like tennis for me, it's really hot. Like it's a hot, like I mean, it's a sexy sport in this movie, but like it's just physically super boiling. And I just remember being on set in the summer of 2022. It was really hot, and I was like, "Oh, this is why I have not tried to get good at tennis because it's just too hot, man." Afterwards, I got used to it, but yeah, it was summer of 2022 with masks.
Yeah, so COVID protocol means you're getting tested, if not daily, every other day. You have to wear masks everywhere. You have to stand 6 feet apart from everyone. It was such a pain.
Yeah, and it was summertime, right? So you're just boiling in the masks in the middle of summer.
And it was mostly filmed in Massachusetts, wasn't it? Like Boston, Wheaton College. Like were the Stanford scenes at Wheaton?
Yep. Yeah, that was Wheaton College.
And then Wedgwood Club, you had mentioned?
Yep, Wedgwood. And then we shot in downtown Lynn a little bit.
Lynn, City of Sin.
Never go out the way you come in.
I'm down there all the time.
Just between us, but nobody else. There was like an armed robbery at a gas station, like right down from set from us, and literally we could see the dude running away from the gas station. It was funny.
That's amazing.
Lynn.
That's amazing.
Keep shooting. Don't stop.
Man.
It was just like, and we're surrounded by police, and I'm like, this is not
right.
Action.
This is not the smartest person. But yeah, we shot all around Massachusetts, Newbury Street, blah, 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 all around, a lot of different locations. And then we did a few days, like I said, down at the Arthur Ashe Stadium.
Sure.
Oh, yeah.
Flushing Meadows, yeah.
Yeah, Flushing Meadows, just the last week of the shoot down there.
So our podcast is, this is episode 7 for us. So we're not even through our first year, but our third guest, Kurt Steffen, is a world-renowned racket stringer customizer. And I think he did work and prepared Patrick's racket for the movie because it had to be painted. It was from a different era because he had to play with the racket he played with as a junior. And so like that head racket that he played with was a very unique paint job that I think he had a hand in, which is kind of cool to have that connection in our...
Yeah, and then we cut it in half for these shots.
Right.
Yeah, we won't tell Kurt about that.
Don't tell him that part.
Wow. And then you had to match all of that.
Yeah, we scanned all of them and then created them in CG as well.
What was the timing? What was the setting? What year was the film?
I think it starts in the late 80s or early 90s, right?
Yeah, early 90s if I remember correctly. But yeah, it's a pretty good flashback from 10 years ago or something like that. Yep.
The period is done so well, you almost don't really notice it until you're shifting between time periods.
They were very authentic with that. Also, one of the old trick, well, like it's a great old trick, is to size everything up just a little bit for when the actors are younger, just to give them that sense of like a little bit younger. So they're all just a size a little bit larger than you would when they were adults. It's little things like that that really help set that. It's quite fun to think of all those subtleties, but I know that we paid a lot of attention to all of the period accuracy stuff. It was kind of a bit.
The scene where they're playing doubles as juniors, and it's totally believable. And Art's hair's pushed forward, he's wearing a hat backwards, and then like later, it's all coiffed and it's like a receding hairline because he's older. Good stuff.
Yeah, next time you look at it, we also took the retractable roof off of the Arthur Ashe Stadium, right? Because that was added after that period. Deep modernized a lot of the stuff in that area. Had to go back to photographs and take a look at it.
That's amazing.
I missed that detail. I'll have to watch it again.
There you go. Get 3 viewings out of it.
See?
We also loved all the Adidas love that was in the movie. We had, Brian, the category manager for tennis for Adidas on, Nathan Roach, episode probably 4 or 5. So I noticed all the Adidas love. I did notice Art's character wearing on tennis shoes. Otherwise, it was all Adidas all the time on the male and the female tennis players.
So the tennis was good. Like the authenticity kind of held up for folks with your eye. Were there things we missed, do you think?
Yeah, well, there definitely were. Like there was a scene where she is feeding balls to him and she's like holding the racket up near the throat, and you just would never do that, like from a control standpoint. But like that's very nitpicky. Art had a one-handed backhand. He would make a swing, but the shot that would come off of that particular swing would not have been the shot that came off of that racket. But again, those are very few and far between. And I think most tennis players that I talked to were surprised by its accuracy and as such enjoyed the movie.
Cool.
I noticed a lot of the Foley art or the sound of the tennis ball getting struck was pretty intense. You wonder how these tennis balls don't pop more often or pop ever.
Yeah.
Because there's a lot of hate in the film. There's a lot of angry shots, especially with Tashi after the argument at Stanford when she had her injury. Spoiler alert for all you listening, you Breaking Back podcast. You can tell there's a point of view where they zoom into her face and she's forehand, backhand, and she is just absolutely crushing the ball. And the Foley art that's edited in, the sound of the tennis ball almost sounds canon-like.
Yeah, it's definitely intentional, right? It's, again, sort of a very dramatic tale told through tennis. So it definitely was intentional for sure. And I think the score also has that very strong sort of presence.
Amazing score.
Oh, it was a great score, yeah.
Great soundtrack.
Was there any special effects on when her knee twisted? Because that seemed pretty gruesome when that...
Yeah, we had a puppeteer on set and a whole fake Tashi knee, and from hips down, just prosthetics.
No way, really? That's amazing.
But it was wearing a skirt and all that stuff, and it had this really gruesome sort of twisting action.
Yeah, it was gross. I believe it. Her career's over.
Yeah.
But the scar was a practical, right?
Correct. That was added by makeup department. Did you all catch like when Art was going for I can't remember exactly what the point was, but there's a moment in the last scene where Art is really stretching for a ball and stretches his knee towards camera. And you're like, oh, like it kind of brought me back when I was watching it. I was like, oh, like kind of this moment where you're reminded of Tashi's knee injury. Did you guys catch that?
He was moving towards the net. So that scene, that's the 23-shot rally. That's where they're inching towards the net. And then towards the end of that shot, they're sort of both in the kitchen, if we use a pickleball term.
Don't cross swords like that, Peter. Come on now.
It's inevitable. But he was sliding to his right, and that long slide, I did have that same feeling where, wow, that's the exact same shot where Tashi ruined her knee. Is he going to have a similar situation? What an awesome climax to the film. That whole shot was awesome.
The knee injury, though. Oof.
Yeah. She brought the best and the worst out of both of them.
If I were to ask you, Brian, like if you were explaining the premise of the movie to somebody while you were shooting it, what would you have said? How would you have described it?
That's a really good question. I wouldn't have called it a comedy. I would say it was just 3 really lost people interact with each other through tennis. Because from a character study standpoint, none of them are really lovable people, right? Like they're all super damaged. Mm-hmm. And so it's a character study of these 3 people, but with tennis as the sort of thing that binds them together in a way. They're all obviously quite driven people one way or another. And so it's just a very interesting character study, but as edited and really, it was present in the script, but really, and when you're shooting it, you can kind of see these funny moments, right? With the guys eating churros.
Yes.
There's some really, really funny moments where on set you laugh and you just don't know if that's actually what's going to come through in the edit. But I was very happy to see all these sort of subtleties really kind of coming through. But yeah, I think that would be the best way I would describe it, is just a character study of these three intertwined people through tennis.
Tennis is kind of the perfect sport to use for this type of conflict, right? Because a lot of tennis players are a little deranged, or it's an individual sport. You live in your head, and I've known scores of tennis players I've run across in junior college tennis that have varying degrees of challenges socially. So it really makes for a nice metaphor, I think, for that type of story.
I guess like if there's 300 people that are the best in the world at something, I'm going to guess to get to be in that 300, you have to be a really different kind of person, right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Oh, yeah.
Driven.
You may not be normal, and that might be what's required to kind of be there, right? That's probably true of many things, including tennis for sure, especially because it's so freaking hot. I mean, it's not just me, right? Like this is like this.
You didn't have to do a lot of visual effects for the sweat in the last scene, I don't think.
Yeah, we might have done a little.
Little crank.
But I remember that was a hot summer 2 years ago.
It was really hot. I'm gonna keep bringing that up. That's my big memory. It was really hot.
What's next for you?
We are on a couple movies right now. One's for 20th century. Yeah, so it's a lot of car chases in this one. Actually, this car movie we shot actually in Cleveland. But yeah, also there is a pickleball movie.
Wow.
Are you bidding on the pickleball film?
Yes, I am.
We'll have to have you follow up if you do that, because
How could they not have you? I mean, look at your reference.
I mean, you're like the tennis guy now. Anything with balls. I do balls.
Yeah, just give me all the balls.
Yeah, I'm a ball guy.
So how do you guys feel about pickleball? Is this like, should we not be talking about that? Is there like competition between the competition?
We don't really give them any credit. We just troll it.
We know it exists, yes.
We can't deny its popularity now.
The movie, honestly, and this is going to sound really douchey, but I'm going to say it anyway. I was on a plane once with a famous actress and her husband, who happens to be a writer and writes a lot of these movies. And I said to him 2 years ago, I'm like, somebody has to write a movie about pickleball, because you take pickleball and the premise of Anchorman, put those together, and it's gold. You have content for years.
Were you flying with Ben Stiller?
No, it was Brooke Shields and her husband, Chris.
Oh.
Yeah.
Right.
He writes those types of movies with Will and company. But yeah, I mean, at pickleball, you can't deny its popularity. You drive by any tennis court, and it's being totally taken over by pickleballers. That's the problem with pickleball, is that they're like hosts. They come and they take over existing tennis property, and they just put down lines and claim it for their own.
And they claim it, it's almost as if they claim it as a DEI issue, because they can take one tennis court and make 2 pickleball courts out of it.
It's all about equity.
Ironically, when we were shooting in Flushing Meadows, they had a pickleball contest or some sort of thing there like a week before. All of the courts had pickleball lines on them. And so we had to remove all of those digital.
Oh, that's a bitch. Yeah.
That was all. There was pickleball lines all over that thing that we had to remove. They couldn't resurface the court. It was way too expensive. So we just did it in post. It was a lot. There was a lot of shots. There was probably 100 shots of pickleball lines. So we know that quite well.
Did you do any court reconstruction or enhancements to any of the facilities? They look fantastic.
Oh, the cleanup on those is probably incredible.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think that the one up in Bedford, Wedgwood, I think they got a new court out of it because we were pretty hard on it. We got a camera dolly running up and down we definitely put some wear on it for sure. Wheaton College, their court was a little long in the tooth in certain areas. So I think that we chose certain areas, and I think that they did do a little bit of repaint of that for the film, because there were some areas that were a little bit spotty for sure. And
then you got on the court at the National Tennis Center too, which is surprising. They're pretty protective about that.
Is that the one inside? Is that the inside one?
You were outside for the doubles scene when they were juniors. Yeah.
Oh yeah, that's down the one down in Flushing Meadow, right?
In New York.
Yeah. It was tricky to get the time there, and they were very protective.
Oh yeah. I've played tennis there, like, because anybody can go. It's a public facility. You know, if you're playing doubles, they won't let like more than 4 people out there. Nobody's allowed to take pictures on the court of any kind.
Huh.
Like, really? I'm just a dude playing tennis with my friends.
Right. Lighten up, Francis.
Yeah. But so I was surprised. It was really cool to see to get that footage included, because I know how hard it is to gain access.
Yep. Yeah, and then there's the other court that we shot on, which was inside here in Massachusetts. I can't even remember the name of the location, but it was a quick moment in the film. But that was where the guys were at the training camp, the inside court.
Oh, yeah. I saw that. You know what? It reminded me of Harvard, because Harvard has a court like where they're all lined up inside a track like that.
Yeah, it may have been.
But the colors were different.
Oh, yeah. We did change some of the colors in that.
Yeah.
So.
I bet it was Harvard.
Well, Brian, we can't thank you enough for joining us on the podcast. And I think we're all definitely going to go back and watch Challengers again with a different perspective.
Tell all of our fans, too.
Yeah, I'm really stoked that it passed muster. I'm really happy for that.
Flying colors.
And we'll be looking for you in the Kodak Theater or the Disney Theater in February, maybe, you know.
Oscar's gold, baby. Let's do it.
And best of luck on your pickleball and car chase film as well.
Yeah.
Thanks, guys. Appreciate it.
Thanks, Brian.
Thanks, Brian. Appreciate it.
That was just nice flow.
Yeah.
Plus, we got a lot of inside dirt
Yeah.
that wasn't dirt. It was just...
Behind the scenes.
The fact that film has 950 shots is insane.
It is.
I mean, that's as much as Star Wars.
Yeah.
Or, I mean, any big Marvel film. I mean, that's what... I thought he was going to say 300 shots or something.
Yeah.
Don't they judge it by hours? How many hours they shoot? Because a typical movie is 300 hours or something like that. And these movies these days are now becoming 700 hours.
If they shoot them digitally, they just run the cameras.
Yeah.
But if they're shooting film, they're typically like 200 to 400 hours, somewhere in there.
But when he bids on the project, DP will say 900 shots. I bet he gets in there, though, and maybe it's like the estimate's 4, and he's like, oh, it's going to need a lot more.
All the department heads get in a room, and they put the storyboards on a wall, and they basically go through and make their notes, and then they all report back with their budgets and say, well, based on my blah, blah, blah. They'll have a giant room, and all the department heads come in and kind of make their notes on the storyboards and pain points, other questions, whatever. Create your budget for your department. You hand it back in. That's a big film. But I'm sure that between someone like Brad Gilbert, who's essentially the choreography for each scene in the film, so he has to sit down with the director and the DP and say, okay, so for this scene, we need to have what? What's the goal for the scene?
Right.
So he's plotting that out with the director in there. And Brian's sitting in that conversation too, because he's got to then say, okay, so you want to have the ball go 50 times back and forth to here, so that's blah, 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 blah. And all of a sudden, like, just the notes and the math. Also, like, you notice in that film a lot, they shoot them sort of above the middle of the chest. So you just see the top of the racket, sort of the follow-through, or the top end of their arm when they come through on the follow-through. And it's a genius way of disguising their stroke, because their stroke is obviously not going to be an Agassi or a Wawrinka, one-handed backhand. My God, I could watch that 100 times.
Right.
There's a lot of tight shots in Challengers. I think the more they can zoom in, and there's a lot of emotion. Each shot, each point had some sort of emotion instilled based on a look or based on the tennis ball that he held at the end, right in the neck, which meant,
Yeah.
I feel like no one was not experiencing some crazy level of emotion on any given point, which then affected the play, and then they sort of played angry, I thought. So
Yeah. I had huge anxiety in that last scene because it takes so long for him to serve. He serves, and then he has a fault, and then he goes back, and then he's thinking, and it goes to her, and it goes to him, Art, and then back to... And then he finally does, like, down by the throat.
Right.
Nowadays, with the clock, I'm like, why is the clock going off?
I didn't think he was going to recover from the ball and the throat thing. I slept.
Right.
And then he serves, and he just sits. He's still in shock. I didn't think he was going to recover.
Well, I got into a Reddit forum and got lost this afternoon, and they talked about how the reason why she slept with Patrick was because it would save Art's career. It would reignite the flame in his competitiveness to win that match, to get confidence for the U.S. Open, yada, yada, yada.
So you mean if she got caught sleeping with Patrick, then that would fuel his anger. Okay, which he did ultimately at the end at the last point.
Right. Like she had to, I guess you could suppose she didn't tell him. Obviously, she knew that Patrick would not be able to not, tell him.
Right. I got it. And speaking of puppeteers, that's my favorite part of the interview with him was the puppeteer. That's how specific they get with her knee injury.
Yeah.
Tashi was pretty much a puppeteer with the two of them. She was literally just playing the two of them, even in the makeout scene, right? When she's making out with Patrick or Art, and then turns and makes out with the other one. And then they all three make out, and then she grabs the both of them and literally says, "You two go at it." I mean, she's playing them from the get-go.
Yeah. Her character was really strong and intelligent and had that foresight, right? I mean, she's obviously very calculating. She married Art to kind of get to the success that she would never have. Yeah.
What about the son? We thought the son was when her and Patrick rendezvoused, by the way, that scene when she's in the hotel.
I think the son is the other guys.
Other guy being Patrick.
Yeah.
Right, that's what I'm saying.
Yeah, I think the son is not.
Because the son had dark hair
Yeah.
and looked more like Patrick.
I think the son is.
But the scene where she's sitting at 3 a.m.
I think it's the demon seed.
You know the demon scene? Yeah. They're in the Newberry Hotel, by the way. They filmed that in Boston.
Yep.
And he walks by on the outside.
Yeah.
And then he comes in. And then Art sees them together and then signs the autograph and then turns around and they're gone. And then next thing you know, there's a dark-haired kid running around.
Bongo, bongo.
Right, right.
Is Sinner a sinner?
As of now, his doping case remains unresolved, which is a bit of a head-scratcher because the last time we got together, he played the U.S. Open, he won the U.S. Open, but the Court of Arbitration for Sport has reopened it based on input from the World Anti-Doping Agency.
I think his A and B samples came back both positive.
Right, but initially it was the Olympics for them, which was kind of the barometer that they used. The results were good enough to let him continue, play the Olympics, do whatever.
We found a discrepancy, but you can keep playing.
But while they're seeking a suspension for up to 2 years, which would be crazy, right? Like the top player in the world that is at the height of his power to be...
He is, 23, 24 years old? How old is he? He's pretty young, isn't he?
He is young. I think he's 21, 22.
Is he even younger than that?
Yeah.
Well, because Alcaraz is 22?
Not even?
Not even, right? He's still pretty young.
Yeah.
Alcaraz is 21.
I mean, Nadal's 50?
Sinner's 23. Nadal. I thought this was interesting. They played recently Alcaraz and Sinner in the Six Kings Slam that we talked about a long time ago. Finally happened. Kind of an interesting event. Talk about the production value, right? Very Middle Eastern, obviously.
Didn't they have falcons flying and stuff?
The intro, the hype at the beginning was overdone.
Well, the hype, it felt like a world wrestling match. The graphics and everything were very over the top.
So Sinner won, walked away with $6 million, not bad for 3 days' work. But when he was asked about if he'd played for money or not, he said, "No, I don't play for money. It's very simple. Of course, it's a nice prize and everything, but for me, I went there because there was the possibility of playing the 6 best players in the world." Alcaraz, when asked the same question, said, "If I say I went there just for fun or to play and forget the money, I'm going to lie." Alcaraz told the media, "I mean, every person worked for that as well. You know, that's how life is about." I love Alcaraz. He tells it like it is. He's like the Neil Young of the tennis tour. He just is very direct, whereas Sinner, he kind of takes a more indirect route. So I just say watch this space. There's a good chance that they have a ruling before the Australian Open that could impact Sinner's ability to play.
Mm-hmm. In the past, how much time has typically been given for those rulings? Do they make them in October, November so that they can retool everything in December before the tournaments start in January?
That's a good question. I think this is just real-time events, right?
Right.
They made a decision. This other group got involved. They didn't agree. They've opened it back up, and it's just kind of unfolding in real time. But as we look ahead to the next few episodes, episode 8, Chris, is going to drop the week after Thanksgiving and recap Rafa's last professional appearance in the Davis Cup, which is being held in Spain. Of course, Spain is competing as a semifinalist.
Wow, so Rafa in Spain with Alcaraz.
Yeah, as his doubles partner.
You can't have much more of a story than that.
Breaking Back should get some passes for that one.
Where's our sponsor? What's Lone Pine doing for that? We could take Lone Pine over to Spain and make it the biggest beer in Spain.
They have distribution over there, don't they?
What would be Lone Pine in Spanish? Pinot de Solo.
Pinot de Solo.
We're on it.
Episode 9, we're going to wrap up everything for the year just in time for the holidays. So a little digital visual, well, no, not visual, a little audio gift for you and under the Christmas tree or Hanukkah,
Or Kwanzaa.
Kwanzaa, all the above.
You know, a genius ad campaign would be going from us joking about creating a beer in Spain, talking about it in a podcast, to like the three of us with the Fiat, with a trunk full of beer, driving all over Spain and getting footage of it. That would be hilarious.
Well, let's do it. Let's make it happen.
Yeah, let's do it.
I'm busy. I'm not busy.
We'll tell you Lone Pine we just needed a shitload of beer and to get it over there for us.
And we can get a Fiat barter deal.
Yeah.
Fiat sponsorship for life.
Why Fiat? It's an Italian car. Are there any Spanish cars? El Fuego?
Bicicleta?
Yeah, we get bikes. We'll all have bikes.
Okay.
Fiat just looks Italian, Spanish adjacent.
I like that. That's how we should just end the year is
Trying to sell beer in Spain at the Davis Cup.
Good product placement for Lone Pine.
Lone Pine paid for us to get here, but we have to pay our own way back. So.
Yeah, we have to sell the beer to get back to America.
We need a wine sponsor over there, I think.
Yeah. Oh, okay.
Thanks for listening, and don't forget to subscribe to Breaking Back on your favorite podcast platform. And be sure to follow us on X and Instagram at Breaking Back Pod.